If I had more hair, I could say the same thing. Pardon my hair. Good morning, everyone. Morning. Hey, Bill. Welcome to Sayville Congregational United Church of Christ, where you were and are welcome long before you arrived. It's nice to be back, and I missed you all. And thank you. And it's good to have different voices for a couple of weeks now and then. So it's good for everybody. And I want to make sure I welcome Mark Levinson. Mark is our music director for today, and we're happy. Where do you come from, Mark? Massapequa. Okay, great. Well, not too far. Well, happy to have you with us. Welcome. Could the quote on the cover of your bulletin, if you have it there, comes from this book I'm reading by someone who I have a high regard for, have had the chance to meet with on occasion, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. And you might know him. He's one of the folks who helped organize and keep going the Moral Mondays out of North Carolina and much more. And the book is The Third Reconstruction, How a Moral Movement is Overcoming the Politics of Division and Fear. And he writes it from a pastor's point of view, which I find to be very helpful. And the quote on the front of the bulletin this morning says, what transcends our labels, our political alliances, and our situational ethics? What is greater than the political majority at any given moment? And the way I see it is that the answer to this question can be found here, in this time together, and in our lives that continue when we leave here. And this morning, our opening prelude that Mark will play for us is Love Changes Everything. Imagine if that were true, because it is. Welcome.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in the call to worship. This is our time in which we add to the story. We contribute to the narrative that began long ago and will finish when? Who knows? When it does end, if it does, the shape will always be partly ours. Here, now, surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, we continue the story together. Come, let us worship in this divine and eternal discourse with prayer, praise, song, and our story.
Songs of endless
Please join me in the unison prayer. Ancient One, how daring we are to speak in your presence. You do know, of course, we must. We are made so that our very being is a language to you. We trust in the conversation that takes place outside of our awareness, the one that tethers us to the ancients and the ancients to come in the story that unfolds, as it always has, now.
So, if I might, now I didn't ask if they'd like to do this or not. Taylor, would you like to help me up here? Come on up. Addison, would you help me? Where are you, Addie? Come on, you want to help? Taylor, come on up. Caleb? Oh, I thought it was Taylor. I'm thinking, where's Taylor in the Bible? It's Caleb. That's these. They're going, hey, Caleb. Come on up, pal. Who are you bringing with you here? Mommy. Okay, Caleb. Caleb, here's what we're going to do. Come here, Caleb, let me hold your hand. And Addie, I didn't see Abigail. Come on up, Abigail. He can hold that. It's all right. It's okay. It's off, Caleb. Yeah, it's off. So's that one. We shut them all off. They try to turn them off on me too, so don't feel so bad. Hey, Abigail, hold my hand. So what a good way, we can hold two hands. What a good way to share the peace with these three young ones so filled with love and peace. So when we're done here, we're going to go out. We're all going to give each other a hug. We're going to shake hands and say, the peace of God be with you. All right? Not yet. Almost ready? All right. So first we're going to pray. We're going to say, God, everybody, in all the ways we know you, you give us wonderful things to share. And first among those is our love and our peace. May the peace of the risen Christ be with you all. Let us give one another a youthful embrace and sign of peace. Okay, let's go. Time to give peace. Thank you. Now, if you're new here, we do a little hugging, but don't worry about that. You can just put your hand out. Good morning, good morning. Morning, Mark. Peace with you. Peace be with you. You're holding down.
Nice to have you back.
Nice to be back. Good
Use
morning.
praise. Okay.
Okay. For those who have children or who are feeling young, after the reading of Luke, Bernie, would you wave from where you are? That's Bernie over there. She's our church school director with Jeannie's help. And we will invite the young folks after the gospel. We'll say, you head off with Bernie, and off they can go with Bernie into the air-conditioned vestry. Don't. Maybe we could swap out, huh? We're all going. Okay, Mark, yours.
Our scripture readings today are from Luke 12, verses 49 through 56. I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and what constraint I am under until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace to earth? No, I tell you, it's division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided. Jesus said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say, it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites! You know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time?
So we invite the young folk to head with Bernie. And to enjoy your time together. My mic on? Mic on? Can you hear me? Come on. John 15:12. This is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. This is what we're used to hearing. And this passage seems to be a little out of character for Jesus. I've come to bring fire on the earth. How I wish it had already kindled. Oh, that's nice. You think I came to bring peace? No, division. We have enough of that. Thank you very much. He sounds very much like some of the street preachers that I've encountered at different places, literally up on a box, talking about the end, the fire, the brimstone, all of that stuff. Jesus must have been upset, you think? You know, every now and then we see him angry or described as angry in the eyes of the evangelists. They talk about him sometimes being pretty upset. The signature act of anger for most folks, the one that comes to mind first is what? Money changers, the turning over the tables, right? I love it when somebody says, yes, Jesus went into the table and he went to the temple and he turned over the tables. He went in there and he went, "Arr!" You know, he was upset. And he has flared up several times in the readings. He was, by all accounts, human, as well as considered divine. In fact, Jesus, as anybody who's been part of our Bible jam, our semester over the last several weeks, we've been reading a book, and in the book it talks about the question of Jesus' divinity was an ongoing controversy. It wasn't settled, quote unquote, until 325 in the Common Era, when the Emperor of Rome, Constantine, called people together at the Council of Nicaea to decide whether or not Jesus was, in fact, the question, similar to God or the same substance of God. And Constantine really didn't care one way or the other. He just wanted Pax Romana. He didn't like disharmony. He didn't like grumbling. And eventually they decided that, in fact, Jesus was of the same substance as God. Jesus was both human and divine. He did die and did rise. And with that humanity part comes many things, right? Love, hunger, loving, compassion, purpose, desire, frustration, and even anger. And there is definitely anger here. These words are not easy. They are not compassionate. They are not loving, and they are not assuring by any means. In fact, they're even somewhat judgmental. You know that part about do not judge anybody? Well, he was hypocrites. You know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it you don't know how to interpret this present time? You hypocrites. Brood of vipers. It must have been a tough week. I wonder what set him off. Well, as with human, it is usually not just one thing, is it, that sets us off. In fact, there's usually a lot of other things that are building up, and then it's not the major problems that set us off, it's the broken shoelaces. We get through all of these crises, and then we drop something, and we break it, or we break a and off we go. And we could probably create a timeline over Jesus' life pretty easily as a group about the things that were making him a little bit upset. There's plenty of references, for example, throughout the text, Jews falling away from the teaching of the Torah. He didn't like that. The leadership in particular, for they were the teachers. And with a population that was primarily illiterate, it was up to them to teach the people what the Torah said. They were the ones that should be towing the line. And instead, many of them had fallen in line with the Romans, assuring their own comfort, their own status, frequently ignoring the poor, the widows, the Jews incarcerated in prisons, because this was about ministry to the Jews at this point. Even not paying attention to the basic, fundamental, ancient tenet of hospitality the way they should. They turned away from what they had been taught and were supposed to be teaching others as they rumbled forward in the Roman chariot, so to speak, rewriting the meaning of God and state, as it usually is at the expense of the marginalized and the oppressed. Remember the widow who put 2 pennies into the tin? And the priests dressed in flowing robes making a big show of their gift. Anger must have been building. And when you're alone and you're fighting for something and you believe in something and you don't have that many people around to help sometimes, or you're wondering why they're not being more helpful, you can get pretty upset. Now, that's not to say that there weren't those that believed Jesus and believed in Jesus, but they seem not to be too many. And clearly they were no match for the authority of the day. Romans made sure that they knew that. They were casually and intentionally brutal, however that was needed to keep the peace. And you remember that Jesus often told people, when he would do a miracle, perform a miracle on somebody, he'd say, do not spread the word. We often say, why is he saying don't spread the word? He would say, it's not my time. Because he knew this was going to disrupt things. It was not time for, it wasn't quite ready to turn everything upside down. And it must have been pretty hard to hold some of that back, and eventually he came out, so to speak. His miracles came out, his teaching came out, the things he was saying came out, and he probably at some point just said, God, whatever's your will, I can't hold this back. And at some point in all of our lives, isn't there a point where we say, you know what, whatever, God, I can't hold this back. And Jesus' faith, his determination, his zealousness, his humanity and divinity drove him and set him apart clearly. He was going to say what he had to say and try to change the things that he was determined to change, or he was going to die trying. And he did. He knew, or at least suspected, the precise cost of stepping out of line, which probably added to Jesus' frustration with those who would counsel him, as Peter once did. Why don't you just go along to get along? Get away from me, Satan, he said. But you know, I think the anger had its purpose, and I think it has its purpose in our lives too. Like many of us, I think Jesus needed to butt up against walls a bit. He needed to bang his head against the barriers. He needed to feel the frustration and the sorrow and the disappointment that makes us all human. And that in that sorrow and that suffering, perhaps Jesus came to better understand the suffering and the beauty of others in ways he never expected he might. Such as when he encountered the Syro-Phoenician woman who begged for crumbs from his table. You know, humans, even divine ones, learn from other humans. And I think Jesus' bouts with angers and what went with it never really wiped out his faith at all. He was learning about his faith. And even if we quote those last words on the cross, you know, the ones, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? Don't we feel that sometimes now and then? God, where the heck are you? And it's a line in the Psalms from Psalm 22, verse 2. Jesus perhaps was praying as the psalmist did, and so what if he was calling out his despair or even cursing God? He was praying. He was turning to God in his lament, in his despair, even in his curses, as well as his love and desire to serve. Now, in some places today, I promise you, there are some people standing up there in that pulpit, and they're going, either you're with me or against me. That's what this is about. Either you're going to live eternally or you're going into damnation, and you know that's true. You know if you don't come before God today and you don't promise yourself to God as you know God, and you turn over your life and your will and your care to God, and you follow these scriptures word for word, oh my God, you're going to burn. No. It seems to me that there is more to this message than the simple, literal interpretation. For me, I think there's a new beginning here in the story, in the middle of the gospel. There's a restart. Luke 2.0. I think that there's the process of a nothing taking place here. You know that Jesus told Nicodemus, you have to be born again from above, a nothing? There's a rebirth going on here in some of Jesus' faith or expression or understanding or something. It's a new beginning. And the story eventually reveals our oneness and reinforces our resistance to any lines that divide us. It's turned on its head by the time we get to the end of the gospel. You know, it takes courage to stand up against monolithic societies that tell you they know what you are and how you have to behave, or religions, especially when those practices of both or either are wrong. It takes great resolve and much prayer and conversation to set aside dogma that becomes like a barbed wire around us. It takes enormous heart and spirit to embrace the simplicity of the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. To love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your might, and to love one another as yourself, and carry that message to the ends of the earth. Or at least to the ends of your block. Maybe that's what frustrated Jesus to the point of an outburst. Maybe it's the same that frustrates us sometimes to an outburst. It's so simple. It's so simple. So we imagine, and we stay on the path of love, and in that and more, we follow in the way of Jesus. Human, divine, just like us. Love one another as I have loved you. It's so simple.
Now we invite you to enter into a time of prayer and to share your joys and concerns. We also invite you to write your joys and concerns on one of the prayer cards you will find in the pew and place them in the collection basket during the offertory. May we hear your joys and concerns.
Prayers for Meg and Greg Honorado, for Greg's dad, who was in hospice care. And also for Bob Brown's family, whose wife passed away. Bob Brown was very instigating with sharing a meal when the Super Kitchen get started.
Prayers for Laura Haney. She's traveling, getting her daughter a car and bringing it down to Tennessee.
This morning, welcome folks who are with us from home. Prayers for Carl Hasselreese, who is in Stony Brook Hospital, continuing to receive blood transfusions to address some issues he's having with internal bleeding. So hopefully he'll be able to get strong enough for them to do some of the tests they need to do. In the meantime, this is his and Frank's life, so our prayers with them. And with Paul Elsner, whose mom is recovering from surgery for a broken hip and a fall. And so she's recovering nicely. Paul says he's starting to feel like she's making him a little crazy, so that's a great sign of healing. I always know I'm feeling better when I start making others a little bit nuts. And for all those others, there's so much going on. What is in your hearts, what are in your thoughts, spoken and unspoken, for people and places and things and all of the folks at home who may be watching, what is in your hearts too. The thing about this God, the thing about these teachings is that we do know that there's something more than just our mind involved here. There's something more than just our body. And that this is the place where we remember that, not to leave it here when we go, but to take it with us as a source of strength. And that God does hear things. As you know God hears things. And there's an exchange going on. Our story continues. And we're strengthened sometimes in the suffering as well as in the promise and the love. Because we remember what it's like to be human. And in that, compassion seems to grow a bit. So may that be what you feel now as you pray and as we come together and we share this time. And let us bring it to prayer, praying the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples as you learn to pray it, saying, Dear God,
God of all good gifts, who gives freely to us, have mercy on us and grant us the peace that only the bringer of peace can provide. Grant that our lives would be an offering and that our work would be a good gift. Let us give in love to your work. We welcome your offerings at this time and invite you to place your prayer and information card in the basket.
Thank you. Amen. And all women, as we like to say. Okay. Please be seated. Gee, you know, sort of early. Maybe I could do about 20 minutes of announcements. Yeah. Could you open your bulletin for just a minute, though, please, into the center fold? And Jane, could you wave? I think everybody knows who Jane is. Jane is continues to collect food for the Greater Sayville Food Pantry, and also back-to-school supplies. There's information here. We'd really like to build a mountain of school supplies up front here, and I know there's folks who have some plans to make that happen. So whatever you can do to help. And Paul Elsener sent in the announcement just below that about a concert on Thursday over at St. John's on Green Avenue. They've got a new organ there, and this musician is, from everything I've heard, marvelous. So we need food, we know that. I want to jump to the next page and just remind everybody, if you could spread the word, that next Sunday, you'll remember the Transgender 101, Trans 101 that we had it's almost 2 years now, I guess. Gender Equality for New York is coming back in next Sunday after worship. They're bringing the refreshments, so they'll have their refreshments, they'll have food and sandwiches, and a panel discussion as well, and we will have a forum on Trans 101, talking about what does it mean to be transgender, what is the transgender community facing, what are their needs, how can faith communities be helpful, how can we personally be helpful to those we love who are members of our family. So if you spread that word and pass that around, please, that would be great. And there's some other announcements here that are coming up as well. So with those things in mind, are there any other announcements? Sean is performing. performing where? The which kind? Oh, the Arboretum in Great River. Sean, our music director. Marsha. You're Sean. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, see Sue if you want to know which Sean is performing where. Geez, I'm out of practice. Okay. Are there other announcements? So I'd like to close with a little bit of a reading again from this towards the end. In this, he says, when oppressed people shrink back, they will always be forgotten and destroyed. I think in today's gospel and some of what we've spoken about, we see a turning point where, just as with the Syrophoenician woman, when Jesus said to her, woman, I'm not here for you, to the dogs of the Gentiles, I'm here for the Jews. And she said, yes, Rabbi, but even dogs get the crumbs from the master's table. And Jesus went, whoa. So too do we need to turn toward all those who are marginalized and oppressed and make sure they know in the ways we can that they are not forgotten. And may that be our blessing today, to remember such things, and for all of you to go forward this week in all the ways you know God, to love God, and to serve that God in the ways that come to you. Amen.